I consider myself to be a lazy gardener, yet every year I manage to produce hundreds of pounds of produce from my garden. Yet it never fails that partway through the growing season, every single year, I lose the battle with the weeds. The weeds take over and I will continue to harvest what I can, but inevitably, things rot on the vine, they fall down, they rot in place because I'm not able to get to them. My biggest pet peeve is food waste, but a few years ago, I was really sick a lot and I just could not keep up with my garden. And so I kind of had to have a mindset shift on how my pet peeve applied to my gardening. That produce that hits the ground and rots in place, it really, really used to bother me. But then I had to rethink about, is it really being completely wasted or is it just being put to use in a different way? And so I started to think about the ways that it really is still being put to use. First off, obviously it composts in place. So once the tomatoes, the cantaloupes, whatever, have ended up on the ground and they've rotted, that's actually adding nutrients back into the soil that is really helpful. And it's going to help my gardens in future years by adding those composts. And even though it wasn't really intentional on my part, it is still helpful. But even better than that, it's actually helping out by giving a kickstart to my next year's garden in the form of regrowing plants. So those things don't always fully rot in place. Often the seeds are still left and those will start to regrow the next spring. My garden thrives thanks to volunteer plants like these. I'll have tomatoes, cucumbers, cantaloupes, pumpkins, all kinds of stuff that will come up on their own from the neglected parts of my garden from the previous year. And sometimes, actually most of the time, those are the sturdiest, healthiest, best producing plants out of my entire garden. And that's because the seeds germinate when they're ready, when the conditions outside are best, not when I decide that it's time for me to start seeds indoors. But inevitably, I will end up with way too many volunteer plants, and that can be a problem in and of itself because things are too close together and they're just not working out the way that I really need the spacing in my garden. So every year I give away 50 to 100 plants because I can't stand to just pull them up and throw them out when they are really healthy, sturdy plants. So the first thing I do is I will offer them up to my neighbors and friends. So how does that really help us out on the homestead? Well, sharing plants is a really great way to open up a barter. I love bartering so much. My most recent barter was actually trading a nice mousing farm cat like this one for 4 laying hens. I had a friend who had too many chickens, but she had mice getting into her chicken feed. So she needed a cat who was good at catching mice and comfortable around chickens. And I needed some more chickens. So we made a trade and we're both super happy with the results. Scooch. Another barter I've done that worked out really well was a neighbor brought over his bulldozer and dug up my garden space for me a couple of years ago. And he asked in return for a steady stream of cucumbers and tomatoes. So I hooked him up all summer long for actually 2 summers with all the produce that he could want. And it worked out super well for both of us. I have traded boxes and bags of fruit from a friend who has fruit trees in exchange for, I would give her a jar of whatever I made from the fruit, such as apricot jam or applesauce. So I try to never introduce cash into friends and neighbor situations. I prefer to stick completely to bartering when we need goods or services. So for zero cost and very little effort, I'm able to greatly multiply the amount of goods that I can offer up to neighbors in exchange for whatever goods or services they have to offer back. And oftentimes these barters don't happen all at once. They're not a straight trade for trade. Sometimes it looks like me giving out my extra plants in the spring, and then come summertime, I might need someone to come and feed my animals for a couple of days while we're out of town. And that is the return trade. So it doesn't have to be all at once. It can be over time. But it works really well. It's a great system and has worked awesome for us over the years. Do you barter? If so, what kinds of goods and services are you offering for trade? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm Whitney, and I'll see you next time.